Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't catch what you were saying. Hold it up.
How's that?
I'm loud anyway.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for coming. And you wanted to talk to us about some zoning issues?
Yes, so
You had said to Matt.
yes, having a conversation about zoning as it exists and then maybe compared to what the future, like from the planning board's perspective and what we should have in our mind of
Okay.
business.
Yeah, and can I just say that, you know, I know some of your members were on some of our master plan committees, and we really appreciate that, especially since we gave you some tasks. And Cindy said it was okay.
I did.
And it is.
A few tasks.
But I think that was very, very helpful, having those members there, so.
For us to
Anyway.
know.
So we're just looking for the direction that we can go back to our membership with and say, here's where the town thinks we should head for development of new business, development of industrials or somewhat commercial space, or where something that's not a main street, downtown core industry or business should be able to go in town. We thought it was the Filter Bed Road area, and the vote that happened for the petition warrant article, you guys was all no.
We want to know where the yes is.
Where should it go?
Okay, well, Filter Bed Road is not a dead issue.
True.
It's on, actually, we're going to talk about it being on our work program for 2019. I think the issue that concerned me was that so many of those residential neighbors came out and really were caught by surprise, and so
You guys were caught by surprise.
yeah. Well, and some of
They knew what was going
some
on.
of those folks were too.
They knew. They'd had a presentation from Victor 2 weeks before he came
I
before you.
understand. I didn't mean to suggest that this was sprung on them, but
Right.
when they saw it presented to the planning board and saw it on a big screen behind us and heard our comments on it, I think they realized that our concerns, and they made their concerns feel more strong.
Okay, I think maybe your concerns might have added to that, but I sat at the presentation he did with that group at the Taylor Homes. It was those same slides and it was the same presentation.
Oh, okay, but you're talking just the Taylor home.
My mother lives there, so
Okay.
I went to hear what was going on.
And there were other
Oh, there were.
residential
Oh, I don't disagree.
neighbors, and it just seemed to me that, you know, possibly we could think about different boundaries, different uses, things of that nature.
Is it my understanding of the expansion that it is a kind of a what am I thinking of? It's a, you know, property by property. You can, you know, it's not an overall. You can do whatever you want. You still have to make a decision by the town on what happens, right?
petition-
There are permitted uses that would have been allowed in the Pine Hill district.
Right.
And so those uses were, once it was rezoned, then those uses would be allowed.
Still, residential's allowed anyway.
And residential also.
I think the other thing that was, oh my God, the other thing that was an issue was, as the board is saying, the southern property owners on Filter Bed were really the ones the planning board, I think, was concerned about. Those to the south of the Taylor home, particularly, that were actually having their property rezoned, and those folks were not reached out to. And you heard some of that during the session, that they were sort of upset that the planning board or the town hadn't reached out to them beyond the notice that they received.
Right.
So I think that's really, the Taylor home was definitely involved in the conversation, and they were impacted by 2 potential zoning changes, but those folks to the south, I think, the planning board knew months in advance when we had that first session with Victor that those were going to be kind of the critical stakeholders, and that talking to them was really important. And we sort of got the sense, I think, that maybe that interface didn't happen.
Okay, that's what I was, did that
Yeah.
not happen? So in light of those comments, because those neighbors are going to be there
Right.
down the road anyway.
Right.
So where do you as a group see something like the contractor's yard, the the agricultural guy, the landscaping guy, where do you see him going?
Didn't know they were going anywhere.
Well, we
A new business.
We need more.
Where would a new guy go to establish his business?
A number of those businesses in that area are there through variances.
I forget that area. If you're saying that area is not the place to go, where do you guys see
Elsewhere in the
it
town.
going?
Okay.
Yeah,
As a planning board,
As a
where
planning
do you
board,
want
where-
to see business expand?
right. So when business comes to the chamber, we can say, here's the area the town's looking at for that type of expansion of your business.
In their planning.
In their
its
planning. Right. So that we can support the business community.
Right.
Well, at the hearing that we had on this issue, when I voted against having the expansion, there were a couple of issues, and to me it seemed like, although Matt corrected me that it is not spot zoning, but it seemed like the extension way down the road was, to me, an issue. It also turns out that the wording of the petition
Is incorrect.
is incorrect. So therefore, that's a problem.
They're asking where
I think
we'd
that-
like to
So we're
see
talking bigger picture, so.
And so therefore, I think that what we really would like to do, and you may also remember at that meeting, we ended up basically removing one of our warrant articles, which was associated with how we were going to rezone the Pine Hill district. And the reason we did that was that we were concerned about how we were really doing it, and we weren't doing it with enough planning. And so I think that, it may be very important to the board to know what you people want, and then over a period of time, we can end up working in a direction which is going to give you the latitude you want, but also work with the individuals who are the actual property owners. And so I don't think that we're against you. We want to have a plan which really works.
Right, and we didn't think you were against us either.
No,
We just-
that's not.
Right, we're just looking for what direction we're headed in.
There are a number of zones in town which are specifically listed as being business districts or commercial districts. What more guidance would your potential clients need than these are areas that the town's planning board has already designated as being good for business?
Mike, I think you're right that there are several business districts, but thinking of the contractor's yard as a specific example, that's really only allowed in, I believe, one
We
zone,
were asked for business, not specific.
two zones.
Specific
Right.
Well, so non-downtown retail is really,
Right, and I think for that, I do think the Pine Hill Road is one of the areas that we should be looking at for, I'm thinking contractors' yards specifically. I actually had a chance to take a drive down there with one of the planning board members recently, and looking at some of the sites along the road, I think it actually makes a lot of sense to potentially do that long term, and we may want to make that zoning more flexible. I don't want to jump to the point of saying that the Route 28 mixed-use business district should be expanded. That's another zoning district that allows for arboricultural services.
right, but
and other.
we have visited that zone so many times.
Right.
And so many times it's been determined not to be the right spot.
I would sort of maintain that for now as well. I think we need to look at Pine Hill Road and whether extension, at least on both sides of the road, with maybe some less intense uses allowed than what we originally proposed. I think that's an answer to some of our problems, but certainly not all of them. That's just my perspective on the issue. And I think that, not to single out properties, but if the Pellinis ever chose to do something different on their property, long term, if we just visualize that area, it's not really part of the Bay Street Limited Business District. It's not necessarily a rural zone or as a residential zone.
It's
as it is
residential right now.
Right. Is there a use that makes sense there? And potentially a contractor's yard is a good use. It's a flat area that could be used for stockpiling. And that's sort of what we were thinking with those zoning changes that we ultimately ended up rescinding, but the uses just weren't quite right. So we were kind of rushing the proposal, square peg, round hole kind of thing. But I think that area is the next opportunity for those sorts of businesses that don't necessarily belong in the downtown core right now. That's my personal.
There was also a little discussion about looking at our list of uses again and just trying to figure out, are they too extreme? Should there be another list that's in between somehow?
So what's too extreme on the list? Give me a couple of too extreme examples.
I think we don't have enough variance in our industrial uses. We have industrial, and then we have assembly, and I think that certainly we've seen the manufacturing industry move cleaner in some ways, particularly more advanced manufacturing that we're seeing in Barrington and Rochester. Our zoning doesn't provide any less intense requirement for that sort of manufacturing that we could potentially have here in town. So I'd like to see more variance in the assembly/manufacturing side of the use table.
You're worried, though, that if you do that, you're going to rule out some possible applications?
Definitely.
Not on the allowed.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like it's simpler than it is.
They like industrial use, contractors yard, general categories, because you can put all sorts of things into that. If you have specific categories, you need to be excluding uses that you haven't thought of ahead of time.
Mike, the only reason I suggest that is because I know that some of the folks on the Pine Hill Road change saw manufacturing or industrial and said, we do not want that here. But maybe if you thought of a specific example that was really lesser intensity manufacturing, it would have been something that they were comfortable with.
That would have to be forest in some fashion again.
Right. But I think you're right. We could potentially exclude something else if we do it that way, but something to look at.
I think one of the ones, the storage and use of heavy industrial or mechanical equipment and metal shops, I think that was one that really was sort of a red flag to people. Oh my God, what does that mean? And
when you talk about that stuff, I have to caution myself and in the thought process, because what we want to think about is we want to think about, you know, how these people are going to survive, and I think what it's coming down to is small self-employed people who may have a woodworking shop, turn some lathes, make some chairs. There's a forge person who wants a metal shop. He's going to have some stock. I mean, there's a fine line there of that industrial. No, this isn't good, and you don't really know enough about what that means for this type of person. So, and I want to think about the area that Victor's working on down there, because he's going to have, what I heard was he's going to have a light woodworking possibility. Somebody's going to do woodworking in there. The building looks nice down there, and I don't think it's a bad example. And I think one thing you think about is that neck of the woods on the left-hand side of Pine Hill, and that's the development area over there. I mean, so there's open pieces of property that are for sale over there right now. There's other lots that are distressed over there that probably will be coming up in the future for sale. I mean, to me, that is an area where I do see potential development, but you know, things have to move. When people come to us with the ideas, then we process it, but I don't think we're in the business of trying to think about the ideas that are going to go.
No, but that's the, when you ask what do we, the business community, want, it's more of what isn't already available for the existing zoning. So that's where we go back to what's in the plan, what's being planned for.
Right.
And I would just comment that as far as the petition warrant article, that was really in an effort to support existing businesses in Wolfeboro and their growth. So looking at where that potential is as well.
So that we can go back to our membership and say, here's where they now are looking at it.
There were several flaws of that petition warrant article. A couple of them were structural flaws. Besides the fact that the article had been written and it omitted one of the lots, which was essential to its existence, and it also was an oddly shaped lot, one and 100 feet down on one side of the road and then partially on the other side of the break in between. But the problem was that I don't think there was sufficient realized that it was not going to be the horror that they thought it was likely to have been, and everyone was happy, and they have come back subsequently and said specifically that they're happy with them as neighbors. It's a matter of selling the proposition. I don't think that was done adequately in this case. So if you're thinking of looking at other areas of business growth, perhaps one of the things that needs to be put into that equation is the propaganda campaign, and some neighbors of what businesses would be going in would be for neighbors.
So back to the list of things that are allowed, perhaps there is a craftsman zone, where it's shops and light commercial industry, not heavy, what was the other one? Heavy industrial, the things that scare people about giants.
So is that something you guys are discussing?
That's something we talked about discussing.
So this is the beginnings of it? Okay,
Right.
all right.
Well,
That discussion was the catalyst that
yes.
came up,
Yeah,
that we should
right. And-
review the list of uses.
Right, and I think some of that has come up during the master plan
Yeah, I mean,
meetings, and I'm hoping that it will during the future land use.
yeah, the timing is a little tricky only because we're kind of working on the more specific document with the future land use chapter. So I think we're hoping to get more specific there. It's certainly not going to be an answer to all these questions, but I think that with your involvement on that committee, hopefully we're able to flush some of these ideas out a bit more.
We just want to be able to support the group that we represent, which is right now the chamber, is why we're here, so that we can go back to them and say, here's where you guys are at, because all of our membership does not have the time or energy to pay attention to everything you guys do, but they need to be informed. And most of our membership was on board with the change in the Pine Hill district, not understanding all of the nuances and things that happened at that meeting, mind you, but they were on board with it. And then when it was voted down, it was like, well, now, see, they just say no. That's the comment that came out, and that's what we're trying to stop, and stop quickly. No, they just don't say no. And here's where we need to get you guys to move to, not you guys, the person who wants to do it, so that we're not in this boat, because that will run faster than anything you can think of.
And although we certainly do represent our Chamber of Commerce first, we have businesses who are not even yet here physically contact our Chamber of Commerce to ask these questions and to ask for an explanation for the unanimous no vote. So it would be, I wouldn't be confident saying, well, they'll all say yes next time as long as all the neighbors are better informed. Like I don't feel that would be appropriate right now. So just looking for some tools going forward.
It would be very helpful if I had a sense of what the chamber was looking for, other than where we'd like to see businesses go. If you had ideas of areas in town you thought would be potentials.
We did in the Filter Bed Road area. Well, we talked about it at why I sat on the master plan, is I brought it up there from the chamber as an area that we were hoping to look at for future development.
And the sorts of businesses that you were also thinking, maybe people who would come to you areas that we were thinking about coming in, but if we had a sense of what sorts of uses they were looking at, and you had a sense of what additional areas in town you thought might be worthwhile looking at, we could put them together and see whether or not someone can adapt, or we can adapt it for us.
That sounds great. I think the first example would be those existing businesses that already exist in our community that we're trying to grow in that area. I mean, I think that is the best example that we have right now.
The master plan survey certainly supported that. And of supporting our existing businesses and supporting infill development. And I think sort of in my mind, we have enlarged what I call the greater downtown area, and Roger Murray keeps asking me to define it, but it's Bay Street, it's Wolfeboro Falls, it's the whole expanded downtown area, and so we've added a lot of uses without really making a big deal out of it. I'm in the downtown area. When we expanded that allowed more uses, takeaway gas stations.
Right.
And I think that's where people want to see the development. When we had the discussions on Center Street, people said, no, the retail area's got to be in the greater downtown. So I think we've tried to do that, maybe not enough. Maybe we should expand those
Right, I think
zones.
we addressed some of that at master plan as well, in that the downtown for retail is because of walkability. And
Right.
how do we create and incorporate the Wolfeboro Falls area into that greater downtown, and how do we make it walkable? So we talked about that at master plan. We did on our committee as well, as to how to create the loop and make it walkable. But part of the other reason we opted to sit down with you guys was that the pushback from the other part of the community that said, see, they just say no. I'm not going to talk to them, they always say no, is where we want to stop. We want that conversation to end. And we want to be able to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And if not, where do we meet middle ground?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Those who say they just say no, coming from the position of not making reasons why the board unanimously voted no.
right,
And I'm not sure
right.
zoning was ever going to be able to go, but that's a hurdle. If they don't do their homework and understand what we do, we can't, unless we explain it one-on-one in each case, we can understand.
Right, so that's where hopefully we can come in with some communication and say, well, there were some issues with that particular proposal.
Right.
Right, so we can explain that. And we can then indicate that there's other areas that might be looked at, or different ways to
That
look.
we are going to look at.
Right, right.
Additional failure to persuade the individuals living there already that a zone change would not be negative to them. That said, obviously, that whole petition article, the whole issue could be revisited again.
Right, right.
I would suggest that if the chamber ends up being able to come up with, 3 or 5 specific issues that were desirable in that petition, although it wasn't really workable, that would be the goals of the planning board to work towards. In other words, we deal with a community of summer residents, and there are winter people here, and you need contractors to deal with all the things they need to deal with. So we do need to have that kind of area.
Right.
And so therefore, if there can be, what do we need, why do we need it, and where do we think it might be appropriate?
Right, and that's,
And if that's transferred to the planning board, then we can start working on it. And it may even be more important if it's in a written form, so that instead of just having people saying, oh, all you do is say no, these are what we think the planning board should be working on. And then I think that we can work in that direction.
Right, yeah, actually, that's a good idea. Yeah.
sure, we can do that.
And
Mary can do that.
what you'd like us,
Mary can do that.
what you'd like us to look at, if there are things that you just don't mention the wayfinding signs.
No.
Because
Or
we're
the
going to deal with
bathrooms.
that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
God, I can't believe I came up right now.
No, but if there are some things that your folks have been saying, God, why don't they do something about this? That would be a good thing for us to know.
It's also helpful if we hear from you guys saying, here's the big picture areas we're working on.
Because we're also looking at what's in writing, like the master plan
Right,
chapter.
right.
and
So
things,
here's the
there's-
big
they're
scope
kind of-
pictures we're working on.
Yeah, well, I mean, just speaking personally, I don't want to preempt things right now because I want the future land use committee I want to see what they are going to come up with.
Oh, true.
We're
true.
going to. There are 3 of us here.
Right.
And
But more what you guys are thinking in the next 2 years as opposed to the next 10 years.
Oh, well, a lot of things in that master plan had to do with it.
Right away, I do that, I know.
I think you made a comment about the master plan that wasn't made at the meeting that night, that the master plan actually supported moving in that district to expand uses down there. Is that what?
That's what we talked about at the master plan, yeah.
And I think that's the other thing we're asking for, is that you know the plan and you guys see what everyone wants. We need you to facilitate for everyone also, not just us. There needs to be a team effort. And you can't just sit there and just say no because there was, you know, something wrong here and something wrong there. Let's catch it 2 months early and work on it together to make it happen.
Right.
But now we got to wait another year. You fixed, yeah, but it wasn't fixed. It wasn't fixed. No, it wasn't fixed. I'm not. I didn't say you didn't listen. No, I
He did. Michael just said he didn't listen.
Oh, okay.
The last comment.
I'm just asking that it's a team effort and that we all work toward the same goal efficiently and effectively.
I was going to ask, is our work program a public document?
Sure.
Then our scheduled work program for 2019 is a public document. You can see what we anticipate on working on.
Awesome.
A whole series of zoning changes.
Right, yeah, and we're going to hopefully get to it again tonight. But that's a...
I can have this?
Can we send that on to...
Yeah, and just as a note on the work plan, that does change bi-weekly probably,
Right.
but it's just a guide that we use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
No, because that's an important piece, is where we want to respond after this meeting to that sort of from our business perspective priority list. But you're the planning board and the experts on it. We can do a better job at helping with the communication piece.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of the things to think about for everybody is how do we combat the issues that came up frequently? Noise, traffic safety. If you have any brilliant ideas about how to make people comfortable with these uses.
Right. Well, so in light of the past article, that's not the petition warrant article, just so you're aware, the people at the Taylor homes were scared, and I don't use that term lightly. Based on what my mother told me, the people from Laconia who came over told that group of older folks was going to happen in that zone, if they let it go in, was horrific. He scared the bejesus out of them.
And the irony is the big conglomerate threatened another Home Depot conglomerate.
Right.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. So he basically told this,
Absolutely hilarious.
this group of
No,
80-year-olds,
we're already big and no one else can come in here.
that Lowe's was going to come. He told this group of 80-year-old people that if they changed that zone, Lowe's was going to come in.
So
I thought, you got to
we
be
will
kidding me.
we will end on that. Nice job.
Got to be kidding me. So,
No, we know. We know.
no, because I turned around and said, that can't happen. Right.
And they weren't the only ones who had concerns about that.
No, I just happen to know that side of that story, so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard in the area, they had heard similar sorts of horror stories about
Right.
individuals coming in, and at the end of the year, they were all good buds. So it's just a matter of selling.
Selling it, right.
And there's no noise, and there's no heat.
But like I said, it's selling it and working with them. It's not, everyone just doesn't have to come to the planning board and sell it, and it's 100%. It needs to be a two-way street. And that's kind of the,
He can sell to the neighbors, to the abutters.
but you can help them sell it if you think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, that was the problem. The way it was presented, it was not.
Yeah, well, okay. All right.
Right.
Okay. And you couldn't you couldn't go back to him and say it's structurally flawed? He didn't want to listen?
Had the Taylor home come here and said we're in favor, and everybody said they were all in favor, it was still a structurally flawed,
Right, okay. Right.
and I could not have voted.
Right. So, and that's, it's good to hear that, because the word on the street is not that.
Okay, and we're going to try and deal with those.
And that's where we want to make sure we stop that conversation quickly.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So,
I'd like to add that it has been very nice to hear from you people. And I think that we are really in agreement as to how we'd really like to proceed. Obviously, we don't have the end result, but it is very nice to hear you.
thank you. Well, we just want to make sure we
Thank you.
support our group as well as you guys in that.
Only good things can come from
We all have to be on the same
discussions.
page or we're all screwed.
Right.
And we appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I think that we're-
Right.
it's at
I know you've got a
7,
big
so
meeting
we
because you
had-
missed last week.
You know, some of those naysayers need to run for planning board.
We're not, they're not that kind of people.
Susan and I are
That's a whole underlying.
That's a whole nother.
No, I mean, really.
We tell them that too.
We do, and we won't stop. We won't stop.
Thank you very much.
Do you want us to move chairs back?
I'll help.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you. Have a good night. Okay, thank you. Okay. It's 7:02. Sorry for the minor delay, but I'll call the Planning Board meeting February 19th, 2019 to order. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. Let me quickly introduce the other members. Down to my extreme right, Brad Harriman, who's the representative from the Board of Selectmen, Peter Goodwin, John Thurston, Mike Cotter, and to my left, Von Dugan as the vice chairman of the Planning Board, Susan Ripley-Ayer, Matt Sullivan, our Director of Planning and Development, and Kathy LaPierre, who is Recording Secretary. We have 3 public hearings tonight, and the way this functions is that we hear from the applicant first. The applicant has an opportunity to make a presentation and go through the zoning requirements for the request. Planning board members can ask questions, any questions they want to ask, and especially ones for clarification. Matt Sullivan may or may not comment on zoning issues if the applicant hasn't fully addressed the issues. Planning board members then need to decide if the application is complete. If it is, we'll make a motion to accept the application as complete, and once we receive a favorable vote, I'll then open the public hearing, and any members of the public that want to speak to the issue, that would be your time to do that. Once we've heard all of the comments, I'll then close the public hearing, and generally we will vote on the applications this evening if we have all the information we need. So, first application, Jerome Holden and Dean S. and Kathy M. Sedler. This is a public hearing for boundary line adjustment, 17 Grove Street and 68 Center Street. Tax map 204-23 and 204-31, case 2019-04. Good evening.
Jim, I think, yeah.
Test.
I guess
Hello.
Wakey, wakey.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Jim Rhines from White Mountain Survey and Engineering, here representing Jeremy Holden and Dean and Kathy Sedler in a boundary line adjustment to adjust 0.19 acres of land from the rear portion of the Sedler land and add it to the Holden land. Just to orient the board and the audience, this is Grove Street here, and in this lower right-hand corner here, there is a blow-up that this yellow outline is this plan, the large portion here, This green is the entirety of the Sedler lot, and down here is the Holden lot, and this is simply a blow-up. So this green is showing a portion of the Sedler land. This right here is Sedler land now, and the proposal is to add this area to the Holden land. The Holden lot will become more conforming, and the Sedler lot remains fully conforming. The Holden lot will go from 0.25 acres in size up to 0.44 acres in size, and the Sedler lot will be reduced from 3.29 acres down to 3.1 acres. We have requested a waiver, and that waiver is from needing to survey the entirety of the Sedler lot. That property was surveyed in 1967. We have shown the perimeter of this based on the 1967 survey, checking to make sure that there had been no boundary line adjustments or changes. And we surveyed all the way up. We basically surveyed this lower half to make sure that we were tied in well into this survey, to make sure when we exchanged it we didn't leave any gaps or gores. The planner review had noted that the plan is missing a note that we typically put on all the plans that says that the property is not in the 100-year flood zone. I did check the map and it is not on, so if you were inclined to approve this, we would ask for a conditional approval so that we could get that note on the plan. We have set the monuments, and we've submitted a monument certification. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the board or the public might have.
Okay, questions?
Is this proposed addition something that's already there? There's, I don't know, one of these maps has a proposed...
I think that's your next application.
Okay.
Presuming you approve this.
I had no questions, Madam Chairman. That was the only one I had about the flood zone notification, but that's been explained, so that's fine with me.
Okay, Matt, did you have any?
No additional comments. The one note that I had in there, Mr. Ryan's already addressed.
Oh, okay.
I move to approve this application as complete.
There's a
Wait, just a second. We need to grant a waiver.
Waiver
Of
first.
174-7G of subdivision regulations, and that's been justified.
Recommend.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Now I move to accept the application as complete.
Okay. Second?
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the application as complete. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this application for 17 Grove Street and 68 Center Street. Anyone interested in commenting on that application? Okay, I guess not. Any other planning board comments?
Happy to move to approve.
Then, Matt, do you have some conditions for us
Yeah,
to consider?
I do have 5 conditions. I'm going to suggest removing condition number 3 as presented in my memo related to a certificate of monumentation, as that's already been provided. Condition 1 is incorporation of the plans as amended to the date of this approval or adopted, and that would be the boundary line adjustment plan presented today. The applicant shall be responsible for submitting a Mylar plan to the Carroll County Registry of Deeds and responsible for all payment of recording fees. All of the documentation submitted in the application package will be incorporated as part of this approval, obviously. A final boundary line adjustment plan shall be submitted with an original stamped by a licensed land surveyor. And condition 5 would be the addition of a note regarding the presence of the 100-year floodplain to the plan. Those are 5 conditions.
Okay, and I want to make note that the form factor calculations, that information was submitted for the record and does conform, so thank you for that. Any other?
I'll second.
Okay, motion was made. Okay.
I'll second.
And seconded, all right. Any other comments? And all in favor of the motion to accept this application and approve it? please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, all right, thank you. On to the next one. And Jerome Holden, J.C. Signs. This is for a site plan review for an addition at 17 Grove Street. And this is tax map 204-31, case 2019-02. Good evening.
Hello, Jerome Holden from 17 Grove Street. As you can see in the picture, that the left garage is what we're trying to add right there. It's 32 by 10. You all have this picture in your packets. And then when you go to the next one, that's the structure. I think that doesn't apply until we have a building permit. And that's the layout. It's just an empty garage space with storage upstairs. Garage door. Next, please. And can you blow this up at all?
I can blow it up a little bit, Jerome, but not too much.
That's good. That's even better. Okay, so you can see the orange line around the outside of the existing structure there. The yellow part is the new structure that's proposed. That is perimeter drainage, and it goes into a town drain. The blue lines are drainage from the surface that go into that perimeter drain and drain into that town drain there. That the blue line around the next door neighbors, which is actually our building, is in the lowest form. That whole lot slants down into the left, and that is also a surface drain that goes into that catch basin. We have 10 parking spaces, possibly 11 in there. The requirement was 10 spaces for the amount of floor space we have for business and residential. We have the snow removal in there. I don't know, is there anything else that I need to
What is the green line? What is that green line?
The green line is the new perimeter drain that will be in there, hooked into that orange perimeter drain.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Jerome, do you plan to remove the existing perimeter drainage on the left-hand side of the existing garage?
I think we will probably have to do that, but it's going to be moved over.
Okay.
And then that shed up there that you see in the back left corner there, that will be removed because we'll now not need that anymore.
Okay. One of the concerns in reviewing this proposal with Mr. Holden initially was lot coverage, but because of the boundary line that is obviously a boundary line adjustment that's planned here, that issue has been dealt with. That was a concern. This is sort of a challenging existing site from a parking perspective, but in reviewing the requirements of Mr. Holden on multiple occasions, I felt comfortable with the proposed parking here, particularly in the context of the nature of his business being a mixture of sort of an assembly slash office slash storage area and the multifamily use and office space on the parcel. I'm comfortable with the provided parking here. I feel adequate snow storage has been provided. I didn't really have any concerns beyond that on the site.
I have one issue that was raised in the planner's report. What do you intend for lighting on this structure?
No additional lighting.
No additional lighting.
Outside lighting, no additional outside lighting.
Okay, no additional outside lighting.
That's good.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is the parking lot being expanded in this process?
It is not. When I originally applied for my permit in 2000, I was only required 6 spaces, I think. So, and I had 8 ever since. I've always had 8 on and outside and 2 in the garage.
Okay, I mean, the reason I ask is if you were expanding the parking lot, then you might be increasing the impermeable surface and cause issues, but...
There is no plan to do that.
Yeah, and again, that was the concern because the addition adds, more impervious surface, but because of that lot line adjustment, we feel the coverage is appropriate here and below the allowed limit in this zone.
And you indicated that the addition does not trigger the need for another parking?
No, I don't feel it does. Mr. Holden sort of addressed it. I think that, again, this is an odd mix of square footages with the addition of the multifamily unit and the office space, but based on my review, this meets the requirement for all of those different uses and does not trigger an additional parking space.
Okay.
Part of that is a bit of a compromise, I think, in the regulation in the sense that some of the vehicles that are going to be worked on for signage are actually they're in the garage space. So those are indicated here as parking spaces for vehicles that are being serviced by Mr. Holden. I'm comfortable with that based on the nature of his business and the lack of, sort of retail traffic, if you will, to the site.
But if he no longer is the owner of the business, does that end up changing the way you would view this application?
Yes, it would likely be a change of use at that point that could potentially be an issue for parking. So I think if we do see a change of property ownership, we have to be very careful to look what use is going into the space that exists there and make sure that the parking provided is adequate for it. So I think the short answer is if it changes, we may need to look at it, but right now I think it meets the needs of the site.
Right.
Okay, this application then is complete.
So moved.
Motion has been made to accept the application as complete. Seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I can open the public hearing on this application. Any member of the public want to comment? Okay.
I have 4 recommended conditions. One is incorporation of the plan as presented. That would be the planning board site plan shown here and included in your application packet. 2 is the payment of all recording fees for the notice of decision. 3 is the incorporation of all the documentation submitted within the application package as part of the approval. And 4, just an administrative note that none of this approval supersedes any previous planning board approvals for the site plan that was approved prior. It simply complements that existing approval.
Okay, and does anyone have any comments on the design?
Just to say thank you to the applicant for going through the voluntary design guidelines process. It's not often that we get someone as cooperative as Mr. Holden, so I think he deserves our thanks.
I must admit that when Jerome brought his rendering in, I feared that he had already built the structure when I first looked at it. I said, Jerome, you have to come to us actually before you build. I don't know if you knew that, but he did some good work to show us what it would look like. I appreciate it.
And I thought maybe he should, make the siding continuous between the doors.
Okay.
I'd be happy to move to approve this application, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Somebody want a second?
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept approve the application with the conditions just indicated. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, folks. Right, on to the next application. Cynthia and Clinton Johnson. This is for a public hearing for a special use permit for new single-family dwelling, temporary wetlands crossing and an elevated walkway, tax map 158-21, case 2019-03. And let's see, the applicant to make a presentation.
Oh, just with more colors.
Knives and forks for this later, do I? Cut the silverware and napkins too?
Thank you. Okay, basically for this special use application, we're looking at a pre-existing lot with a dwelling on it to look at the impacts to the wetlands and the wetlands buffers. So basically, those are the issues that we'll be focusing on.
As long as I don't throw off the vote, I think I probably should recuse myself because I worked for the former owner. So just step down.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Jim Rhines from White Mountain Survey and Engineering, here representing Cynthia and Clinton Johnson in their request for a special use permit to be permitted to redevelop their existing developed property under Article 2, Section 175-10B. The property is located at 134 Piper Lane. At the end of the lane, it is on tax map 158, lot 21. The lot is 0.8 acres in size and has approximately 220 feet of shoreline by the shore. Unlike many of my clients, the Johnsons wish to redevelop this property in a minimalistic manner when many of my clients try to maximize it. And anybody with tenure on this board would remember that this application, or this property, came in with another application back in 2006 for a much larger home. It was approved. It was it was appealed. The Superior Court upheld the Planning Board's approval. It then went to Supreme Court, and that was overturned and remanded back to the Planning Board. At that time, with the former owners, we started to redevelop a smaller plan, and then the Johnsons ended up purchasing the property. Cynthia has some memories of this property, and I know that she shared a letter that I think was submitted in the file. Her father originally purchased this property and built the existing structure, but for Sheepshead Bay's tenure of ownership, it has been in her family. And so she is essentially there. She's trying to recreate what she recalls there and modestly redevelop this structure with a new structure and a very small addition, just roughly 200 square feet in the northeast corner of the building. There is a boundary dispute, and I have highlighted it here. It's a small sliver of land, triangular in shape. It's about 7 feet at the shoreline, and it goes back to a point in the back of the property. It really isn't material to the application before you, regardless of which boundary would ever, if it were litigated or if an agreement wasn't reached between the two parties. Regardless of which boundary is used, we're not anywhere near the percentage of lot coverage, and we're not anywhere near property line setbacks. So now I will go through the special use criteria for this. If I can find my notes. So consistent with Article 2, Section 175B, this proposal is for lot redevelopment within the wetlands setbacks, wetlands buffer, and the wetlands when no alternative location on the parcel exists which has a less detrimental impact on the wetlands. And less detrimental impact on the wetlands shall include at least one of the following. Number one, development that is down gradient from the jurisdictional wetland, or number two, development and or redevelopment within a previously disturbed area and where the previously disturbed area provides no protection to the wetlands. So in this instance, we comply with Section 175-10B2 because we are proposing to redevelop within the previously disturbed area that provides no protection to the wetlands. The replacement home will reduce the footprint of conditioned living space from 780 square feet to 641 square feet, because right now this corner right here is going to be an enclosed screen porch, and that is living space today. The home will have stone infiltration trenches along the eaves and along the proposed retaining walls as part of the stormwater mitigation. This proposal also lifts the roof lines to create a second floor on the home. The replacement access to the home will be an elevated walkway across the wetlands here, whereas right now there's just a walkway that's lying right in the wetlands. The existing one is 78 square feet, and that doesn't even count the footpath that traipses through there. This will be 217 square feet passing over the wetland, but actually only 3 square feet of it will directly impact the wetlands because it's on sonotubes and elevated, so flows can pass beneath it, where presently it has to flow through the walkway. So based on that, we believe that we have satisfied the criteria in Article 2, Section 175B10(2), and believe that it's eligible for a special use permit. I will point out one of the things that Matt asked me today is, as we noted on the plan and in the application, there is a very poorly drained wetland in this area right here. It's shown on both the existing and the proposed. This line here on the existing and this line here on the proposed, obviously same line, is the 75-foot setback. And if you'll note, there is one small area in the proposed area here of roughly 80 square feet that is outside of the 30-foot setback, but inside the 75-foot setback from very poorly drained. Also in the very poorly drained, there is a requirement that says that you cannot remove more than 50% of the basal area within the buffer here. So this area here that comprises this lot is about 27,000. Well, it's over 27,000 square feet, and if you just stayed in this area here where we're not proposing any impacts at all, that's 14,600 square feet, so it's more than 50% of that area. So there's no proposed alteration in that area, so we would clearly satisfy that section of the ordinance as well.
Do you agree with that?
Which element of it?
What he just described, that he complies with that section.
Very poorly drained
Yes.
sections. Yes, I think what he's shown on the plan does comply with that section of the regulation.
Okay.
But that doesn't speak to whether or not it meets the criteria, obviously. I think he's shown on the plan what's required by the ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
We do have in hand our Wetlands Bureau permit, we have our shoreland permit, and we have a sewage disposal permit. The construction is proposed to be by a temporary construction access here that pretty much is very close to the existing power line that the electric company keeps clear of vegetation now, so that's going to minimize a change in impact. That will only be there during construction, and then it will be removed. We have proposed a maneuvering area down here so that presently this is what exists. You just come in and they do park on here, though it's not graveled, and that's how they turn around. And there's a few stones piled through here that hold up this corner to make it somewhat level. And we're proposing a retaining wall around there and a more formalized turnaround so that then the walkway will come off of that across the elevated walkway to the other retaining wall. I believe we've got the erosion control we've shown on here, erosion siltation fencing around the proposed EDA and around the home construction and around here. And we've also shown some down at right at the shoreline where this drainage way comes down through. The intent is to do this do the site work during times of dry or low flow to minimize impact. And I think that summarizes everything, and I'd be happy to answer questions that the board and the public have.
Jim, just one question. The plan and the perennial runoff terminology versus perennial stream, could you just address the difference in those two designations as shown on the plan?
Yeah, there is perennial, this is a perennial runoff. We've been working on and off on this application for 13 years, and any time I've been there in the summertime, that is dry. I looked in the Wolfeboro zoning regulations, and there wasn't a definition of perennial or not, so I went to the Wetlands Bureau regulations, and they define this would be an intermittent because it doesn't flow at certain times of the year. And so for that reason, this would be intermittent in the applications since the commencement of work on this project 13 years ago. We've been calling it a perennial runoff.
But you mean an intermittent stream according to DES standards?
It would be intermittent stream by DES.
That makes a difference.
Yeah.
That makes it more understandable. I have a question, Madam Chairman. In your narrative, first paragraph, okay. Last sentence reads, there is also a separate non-waterfront lot that abuts this lot, which the owner plans to merge with this waterfront lot as a condition of the approval of this application.
That is correct. I forgot to note that. So there is another lot that abuts this lot, the rear of this lot, and they would be willing to merge that as a condition of this approval.
And is that one of our conditions for approval?
It certainly could be. I did not include it in my recommended conditions, but it could be included.
Would it be a recommendation that you would want to make to the board?
Yes.
Okay, then we should add that as an additional condition of approval. Now I will write something of this other member's question.
I am interested in the temporary bridge across this wetland, and you say you're going to do it in a dry spell when it's dry, but we know that the weather is variable, so obviously you need to be working on that. And I guess one of my questions would be what is the foundation for that structure? As in, if it is in a wetland, you could put some blocks in there and they'd sink out of sight.
Yeah, we have proposed some geotextile to be laid down first, and what I had mentioned to the TRC is we could certainly demonstrate the size of the blocks, because it is going to be blocked up, so that in the event it rains, water can pass beneath it. And so a combination of the fabric and the size of the block to make certain that we can demonstrate that it's not going to sink in, as you say.
And the owners seem to be wanting to prevent any problems, and they're working in a very good way, and I just don't want to make sure, I want to make sure that the construction phase is not something which causes them angst.
Right. I can promise you that they are as keenly aware of it as you folks. They originally did not want to do this temporary crossing. They wanted to come off of construction by barge, but questions were raised at the TRC and concerns that creates such a disturbance on the shoreline that they felt that was more environmentally a greater environmental impact. So went back to the original temporary crossing that had been permitted by the Wetlands Bureau.
Okay. Given DES regulations regarding fertilizers in proximity to the lake, and given the Conservation Commission's stated concerns for cyanobacteria blooms in the lake, could you address, one, their concerns, and two, what plans your client might have for landscaping within the 25 to 250 foot buffer from the lake? Specifically, I presume they understand the sorts of fertilizers one can and cannot use in that area, and they understand that they will be following those sorts of requirements.
Yeah, my conversation is they don't want a lawn. They want this to basically stay like it is. Cynthia has, like I said, memories from the 50s on, she was born in the 40s, so from the 50s on of what this is and what she wants it to be, and they want a place here on the shoreline, and they're not looking for lawns or anything like that. So there's been no discussion about any kind of fertilizer or creating lawns, any plantings beyond natural plantings.
Just natural plantings, leaving what's there now?
Yes.
And maybe supplementing it with other things that would naturally be found?
Yes.
On the shorefront?
Yes.
Can you address the Conservation Commission's concerns regarding cyanobacteria blooms and their activities on the site?
Yeah, what we've proposed is infiltration trench both along this retaining wall and around the house where there is none now. So the idea is going to be to try to get this to infiltrate where, where none exists now. And they had also expressed some concern about this existing structure is on piers. The proposed is going to be a full frost wall, but then slab construction. So the frost wall will go down and then filled in, and that will be slab construction. So the retaining wall and the frost wall, which will expose, will keep any stormwater runoff from running beneath it and help keep it, in the area of the wetland. And the infiltration will keep anything running off of the house from going in and not going directly into the wetland as it does today.
So you do not anticipate any activities by the client? We've already discussed the fertilizer and leaving the land as natural as it was found prior to 1946 in the construction of the first camp. Do you then feel comfortable that the Conservation Commission's concerns regarding cyanobacteria blooms are misplaced in this particular application?
I think they're as addressed as they possibly can be if you're going to allow development on the property.
Okay, the Conservation Commission had another issue. They viewed the main issue to be the expansion of the impervious surface and nutrient inputs to the intermittent drainage adjacent to the house. And then further, they continued to believe that any expansion in the floodplain of this intermittent stream is a poor idea. Can you comment on that? And also, could you tell us what the coverage is, the existing and the proposed? I couldn't seem to see that, but
I believe it's about 8% or 9% in the proposed condition. I thought I had included that in my cover letter.
You mean an 8% increase?
No, total. The total lot coverage.
Okay.
When it's merged, it would be even less because the
when
lot
it's
goes
merged,
back. Yes.
Not on the existing.
Right. And in terms of, additional runoff into the wetland that the conservation was concerned about, that we felt we have addressed with the infiltration trenches so that it's not going to go in. And so we feel that the 200 square foot increase that we have requested is going to go to infiltration trenches, where now the entire structure doesn't go to infiltration trenches, so we feel we're reducing the runoff. And in terms of the floodplain that they talk about, I use floodplain in air quotes because the runoff stays down here, except in an open winter with this on piers, ice builds up, and then it starts to flow underneath the camp. But when that's open and free, the runoff stays in this area. So by putting in this retaining wall and the frost wall, we feel that that's going to further prevent even in an open year, from ice trying to go in that direction.
The Matt had put together, I mean, you took your figures from Jim's information, and it just seemed, I was surprised when I looked at the existing and the proposed differences in the impacts. I mean, the temporary impact, that was significantly more, and that would be for the construction. The direct wetland impact went from 78 square feet to over 800. The permanent wetland buffer went from about 840 to over 3,400 square feet. And then the setback impact was also significantly more. Can you just comment on?
Sure.
It seemed like a lot for a pretty small.
Yeah.
Can I just make one clarification too?
Yeah.
On my 809, I did include the temporary construction access. That likely should not have been included, as that's not a permanent impact.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So really that should be, I apologize, I just included something that probably shouldn't have been, so that should be around 200 square feet there. So it's an increase of about 100%, but only by 100 square feet or so, just as one note.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
but if you could just
yeah,
kind of
sure.
comment on that, please.
So I was going to point that out, and also in that one line, we've counted the 170 square feet of the walkway because it's above the wetland, but the actual impact is 3 square feet where the pylons actually impact the wetlands. So that.
Didn't you say that was 270? Didn't you say that was 270, the walkway, not 170?
Did I? Okay, yes. Yep. Permanent wetland buffer impacts are, a lot of it here is the maneuvering area that today it's not defined, but they drive on it, they move around, they turn vehicles around in there. So our calculation was based on, what's sort of gravel, but the reality is that buffer is being impacted now. So I think, we've actually indicated what would be formalized. Our existing isn't probably as accurate as it could be if we talked about where they drive. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite as large.
Okay.
And then also you can see when you compare these two, they're pretty similar, other than this one little corner. So we've included where they're working. This area right here as they come through. That's where you're going to walk into the house. So there are some trees there now, but that's going to be impacted. So but the lot in general is going to be fairly similar.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, I got a couple things. So this walkway across the 276, the walkway area from the parking area across, could you explain that one again to me?
Yeah, so there's a retaining wall right here, John, and then there's one here, and this walkway is going to be level, and there's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8 piers across there to elevate it so that flow can go beneath it, and it'll be supported on these ends by the retaining wall.
So is it wood?
Probably these will be steel, but the I don't know, maybe they'll use Trex or something. Right now, this is wooden and it's sloped, and if you attempted to go out there now, that would be pretty icy. So I told them that I wasn't going to affix my stamp to anything that wasn't level in case it had frost on it in a November day if they were here or whatever.
Okay, thank you. So the retaining wall at the beginning of the parking area, that you've got it from the walkway, goes down towards the lake and then comes back sideways and contains the parking area. What do you plan for the water in that area? It's just going to kind of gang up and...
These are these are very low. They're not even 30 inches tall, and so they're going to be segmented like an Allen block type wall with a stone, pour it so that stormwater runoff from the
yeah, but
parking area can
the
flow
surface
into
water, what happens on the surface water?
It's going to run to those trenches along the edge of it and into the wall, behind the wall.
Jim, you're showing the infiltration trench on the outside of the retaining wall, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stand corrected. Then it's going to run to it and over the face of it and into the trenches.
I don't see any other way that you can do it, and I don't mind the plan. Obviously, the area around the house, you've done your trenches around the house. I think that's a good plan. It's hard to get to, so if somebody wants to build there and they can reclaim the wetland and do a nice job, I think that's a very important part.
Yeah, I agree. As far I look at the two requirements that you have to meet in order to get past 175-10B. Number one is, can you develop down gradient from the jurisdictional wetlands? And I don't think you can. And number two, does the development within a previously disturbed area provide any does it provide any additional protection to the wetlands? And I think all you're doing is really increasing, building in an existing footprint. You're not disturbing any additional land, and where you are dealing with wetlands issues and drainage, you've got your infiltration trenches. I don't personally think that you're likely to be looking at, or the applicant is likely to be looking at it, her impact having a significant increase on cyanobacteria in the lake, because I think that leaving the area in its natural vegetative state is the best thing you can do, or the applicant can do, to avoid that kind of a bloom in the future. You have an approved septic system from DES. You have your DES permits. And I just congratulate the applicant on the overall design here.
Any other questions?
Environmentally sound, I think.
Susan, are you all set? Matt, anything else?
I just want to go back to one thing. So on the infiltration trench that I was just asking about, so the infiltration trench is on the outside of the retaining wall?
Yes, that's the way it's shown. So if these are Allen block walls, so if they have a 1-inch batter, so it might run down a couple of blocks and then into the infiltration trench at the base of it.
Okay, so the trench is at the base of the retaining wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, usually you dig a base down and then put the stuff down, and then in front of it there's a little extra area that's open.
Yeah, I was looking at the detail. I was just trying to get a sense of what the grade of or what the elevation of the edge of the wall would be, and then what the actual grade, elevation would be of the trench.
I think the question is, how deep is the trench?
It's an 18-inch trench, it looks like.
I think we show yeah,
both trenches are 18-inch.
Okay, then the application, all the required documents have been submitted and addressed. So would somebody be willing to make a motion to accept this application as complete?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. I'll open the public hearing now, so any member of the public that wants to comment on this application, come on up and make your comments now. And then give it your...
Jack Drinkwater, I'm the maintenance man on Piper Lane for 25 years, and I am well aware of the conflicts that have existed for so long, and it'd be great to see things get accomplished. I had two questions, or one question, and maybe two. One is, will this have any possibility of causing runoff onto that adjacent property? Well, the Wallace property. Yeah, sure.
So the Wallace property, if you sort of draw a line perpendicular to the way the stream flows here, the Wallace property is anywhere from 1 to 3 feet higher at any point along the stream than this. So no, there should not be.
Okay. Then I would like I'm confused over the temporary bridge, if you will, and the walkway. Why are they separate?
So the temporary crossing is so that materials and equipment can get over to actually construct the home. Then that will be removed, and that is much wider than the footpath that will be permanent, so that they can park and walk over to their property.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Rick Sager. I'm an attorney. I work at Sager and Smith in Ossipee. I represent the Wallaces, which are the party to the right below. I have a number of issues and questions. There's been a long history regarding this property, as Jim represented. We were hoping to resolve a lot of these questions before today, but Jim wasn't authorized to talk to me, so I have a lot of questions for him, or some questions for him tonight, and for the board as well. My clients are not here tonight due to a medical issue in the family, so I'm here on their behalf. Obviously, this is a challenging site. My clients are not necessarily opposed to this application, but just want to make sure that all the requirements are met. I assume that the board has read the Conservation Commission's concerns, which are numerous and concerning to my client. They comment in actually on both applications, the buffer of 5 feet leaves no excess room for construction of the foundation. The house is constructed in a floodplain, and the floodplain has flooded in the past and some years ago, and the first floor of the house was flooded during at least one such event. The expansion of the house in this location may be desirable due to its proximity to the lake, but the Conservation Commission believes that they can meet elsewhere on the property a further setback of the house such that it doesn't impede into the 50-foot reference, 50 foot from the reference line. Since they're going to raise the existing house anyway and rebuild, it is believed that the house could be moved back further from the lake with less impact in the lake. You've already talked a little bit about impervious surfaces and the cyanobacteria issue, which is of concern. My Alexis Wallace, who is the wife of Jeff Wallace, who are both my clients, swims in this area a lot. She swims like 3/4 of a mile a day, and she has noticed the quality of the lake going downhill rapidly and does not want to see any further degradation of the lake. The Conservation Commission also says it's premature to allow expansion of this dwelling at this time, that the intermittent stream should be looked at more closely before considering this application, and they sum up by saying any expansion in the floodplain of this intermittent stream is a poor idea. A question I have when I started to get into it is this is being classified as a lot redevelopment, which I understand that term isn't specifically defined in your zoning ordinance, but there is another section that talks about lot redevelopment, and I don't believe that has been addressed in this application, and that is under section 175-67, which deals with shorefront lot improvement standards. Now, this entire lot is within 250 feet of the shore, and it's a question, why isn't that issue specifically addressed in this application?
It's an excellent question. The standards in 175-67 are addressed through the town of Wolfeboro's shoreland permitting process. We're one of the few towns in the state that actually have a municipal permitting process. So that review typically happens at a later phase during the building permitting phase. With that said, I think special use permitting plays a critical role in review of that section, but that is a subsequent process to the special use permitting process before the board tonight.
Okay, so that's going to happen sometime down the road, assuming this application does receive approval of this board.
That's correct.
I also saw, jumping ahead a little bit, that this application is also going to require a special exception. Okay, so that's going to happen at some point.
That's correct. There is a vertical expansion proposed on the towards the reference line on this project, and that vertical expansion is within the 50-foot setback and would require a special exception. But because it does not, in and of itself, have any wetland impact, it's not part of this special use permit request, but would be required to seek a special exception from the ZBA.
Another concern that, and a lot of my questions are truly questions, not accusations, but there is a boundary dispute. Jim said that it doesn't really impact what's going on here, but I disagree. It may not impact the actual showing the small deviation that Jim has on the plan, but until that issue is resolved, we don't know where that boundary is. Now, it could be one of the lines that he's shown. It could be neither of the lines that he's shown. We're hoping to resolve it by agreement, but it isn't resolved yet. So the line could be pretty much anywhere on that plan, and I think that needs to be resolved before this board gives an approval to this application. It's tough to approve something when you don't really know what all of the square footage impacts are based upon the area of the lot. And just for the record, we disagree wholeheartedly with their expansion of the property into my client's property. I have a question regarding the proposed parking area. Obviously, there's going to be a number of, if this is approved, there's going to be a number of construction vehicles coming to the property. Where do they turn around? I guess is question number one. I don't know if Jim wants to answer that, but
why don't you
okay.
keep
where
on, but where are you talking about with the boundary dispute, where it would, I mean, where do you, no, I know that, but then you said that you didn't want it to intrude onto your client's property. So where would? Are you talking about the parking area? Yeah.
The applicant has suggested that the bottom line.
Okay.
The applicant has suggested that the bottom red line. Oh, thank you. You're so accommodating. Is this all right? Yeah, I love this. Had it. The applicant is suggesting the bottom red line on this plan is their boundary line.
Yeah. Okay.
My client is saying historically the top line has been the boundary line. Now, it's a fight between surveyors at this point.
Okay, I just didn't see any construction in it, or
No, neither did I.
they still would have to cross over the.
You stated, Counselor, that the boundary line could be almost anywhere on that plan, and I was going to ask you, could you speculate exactly how high up you thought it might go?
No.
Are you comfortable saying that the disputed area is as shown on the plan? That it could either be at the line at the top or the line at the bottom, but it's not likely to intrude much farther into that lot?
I can go into the history of the...
You don't need to. I just need an opinion.
I'm not prepared to give you an opinion today. My opinion is that we don't know where this boundary line is.
But it's got to be within that red hatched area?
No, I don't know that. I have no idea.
Do you think it could be higher up and closer to the proposed house?
Yes.
How much higher?
When the deeds were first, if you want to get into this, I can get into this. But when the deed to this property was first issued, it said 150 feet of frontage. Now, we have a question about whether or not that means straight line frontage or along the shore frontage. If it's along the shore frontage, then the line could be considerably higher than where it is right now. If it's straight line frontage, then it's going to be somewhere in this particular area. But I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I like this thing.
Okay, so where will the vehicles turn around? That's where
yes,
you
the
are.
question is, where do the vehicles turn around? We have, number one, emergency vehicles. Number two, construction vehicles. This is a private right-of-way leading to this property and dead ends in their property. Yeah. And my clients do not want to have heavy construction vehicles turning around on their property. It seems to me that in order to facilitate allowing heavy or larger trucks to turn around, this turnaround area has to be bigger, which is already impeding into the wetlands buffer. And I don't know that with big construction that you can do this turnaround without actually impeding into the actual wetland itself. This is sort of what it looks like right now, the turnaround area. So this is, all of this is an expansion into the wetland buffer. And this, again, this is a tough piece of property. This applicant is asking for you to, as you know, to allow them to do something which is on a real, again, tough piece of property. This is a wetland corridor that leads down, and here's the lake right here. Anything that comes out of this house or anything that spills is going right into the lake through the wetland. I mean, that's a concern. I think that's what the Conservation Commission was trying to relay to you. As to the construction bridge, I understand that there is a permit that was issued back in 2009, I believe, and it was renewed to somewhere in the 2020s. There is no construction detail relative to this bridge. It's going to be, as I scale it off the plan, roughly 65 feet long and 12 feet wide. That's a significant bridge that's going to be crossing over a wetland and what is going to be in place in the unfortunate event that a truck spills while on it or tips over off of it. I mean, those are issues because we're not talking well inland. We're talking roughly 80 feet from the shore of the lake. There is no design for this bridge right yet, and I assume that will be addressed at some point in the process?
Yep. Director David Ford of Public Works Department expressed similar concern about the lack of a full design for the bridge, but felt comfortable that it could be addressed during the building permitting phase should this project move forward.
Okay. And during the building permit phase, does my client receive any notification of that?
They do not. They do not.
Okay. Can they be part of that? If this is approved, can they be part of that approval?
My concern is extending that courtesy to your client would create a possible inequity in the process that does not exist right now. And although I understand the interest of your client, I would not recommend that we include any special notification or involvement in the permitting process. With that said, I think it's fair for Mr. Ryan's client and your client to potentially have some sort of face-to-face or some discussion around the building permit, but I would hesitate for the town to play a role in facilitating that discussion directly.
Okay. As far as the wetlands approval, this is another question. They were obtained in roughly 2009, as I recall correctly. They were renewed. Is the application identical to what it was in 2009 that the Wetlands Bureau renewed the permits? It seems that there's a different layout of the property from when it was first sought to be developed in 2006 to now, and just wondering if that information relative to the new property layout has been provided to DES. You've said that there's no possibility of increased water on the Wallace property. And if I can just have a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think that covers all of the issues at present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So in response to some of Rick's questions, though the boundary dispute is not really material, I will just say this interior boundary isn't really the historic boundary. That's a boundary that the Wallace's surveyor created about 2001. And every monument on this property line, that's the one they show, was set by their surveyor. And the bold one are the line that we have arrived at. So I think it's, unless a third surveyor becomes involved, since their surveyor stuck their stake in the ground first on this side, I think it's unlikely that it's going to be anywhere except one of these two lines or something between it.
So Jim, both lines are monumented today?
Both lines are monumented today. They are. And the Wallaces had erected, once we did our survey, the Wallaces erected a chicken wire fence or some sort of a fence down their boundary line. And so just as the Wallaces feel that the Johnsons have encroached, the Johnsons felt that the Wallaces had. So again, it's a civil issue. It's really not material, but just so that the board knows, two licensed land surveyors, because of the way the deeds are written, have come up with two separate boundary lines, but this is the difference between what two surveyors have come up with.
Okay.
In terms of construction vehicle turnarounds, I think that based on the distance from this property down to the intersection where Piper Lane comes down, and then it sort of reaches the shore, and there's a larger turnaround area, and then it turns and comes across a couple of lots to our lot. I would think that it's probably likely that they're going to the construction vehicles will turn around there and back into this. I think that's a pretty high likelihood. So they won't be turning around on the Wallace's property, and they likely won't be turning around even on the Johnson property. They'll probably turn around at the larger area at the down by the intersection there. This crossing does have a design. We show the detail right here, and that's the detail that was submitted to DES and which they approved to the Wetlands Bureau. It shows the construction crossing. Dave Ford has asked that we show some soil-bearing capacity computations to make sure that this will be satisfied. But that is the detail that was submitted and approved. So there is a design. It isn't that there's no design. And in terms of the permits that have been granted by the state, the application that you see before you is identical to the permits that were granted by the state.
But not in 2009.
Yes, they were, because actually Sheepshead Bay started to go back, and they actually had us obtain these permits for this footprint. And we got all of those permits, and that's when the Johnsons and Sheepshead Bay ended up striking a deal and purchased the property. So then when the Johnsons moved forward, they moved forward with the footprint that Sheepshead Bay had gotten approved at the state.
Okay, so this plan is the same as 2009?
Well, it never was submitted to the planning board.
No.
It was, yes, but it is the same that was submitted in 2009.
The state looked at is
yes.
Now what we're looking.
In fact, actually, this is less than what they approved, because what the state approved also had a little tiny retaining wall here and an elaborate, or not an elaborate, but a nice walkway down to the shore, and things that the Johnsons don't want. Again, they want to keep this a natural camp in the woods on the shore of Winnipesaukee that Cynthia remembers. Thank you.
Okay.
So the sequence of the driveway to be built, are you going to build that first so you have a parking area for the people?
Oh, down here. Yeah, I would think that would be one of the first things that would get done, yes.
And the crossing area for the temporary bridge, is there a high slope there where somebody could fall off of that?
No, it is not a high slope. I mean, obviously, if a vehicle went off the side of it, it would list. And my guess is, as everyone has said, and everybody here recognizes, this is a challenging lot, so they're probably not going to come in with the largest construction vehicles they can make and load them to the height that's possible. They're going to try and work within the conditions that they have.
So that design, is that in theory the geotextile with 1.5-inch stone or some sort of solid material like that they drive on?
Well, so the geotextile would go down to keep the soil from coming through and intermixing. It's like what we did when Dunkin' Donuts was built right here in town. They came in with the first wheeler load before we put any geotextile, and the loaded vehicle went right up. The wheels came about 8 feet off the ground, and we laid down geotextile fabric and with about a foot of gravel on top of that geotextile, the next load just drove right out like it was on pavement. It was quite striking.
Did you want to make any more comments about, Mr. Sager brought up Conservation Commission. I know you talked about it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say, you know, the Wallaces swim, but I will tell you that Cynthia also swims in this very same shoreline and was very distraught over the cyanobacteria bloom that happened this year. You know, we keep referring to a floodplain, but there is no mapped floodplain through here.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask, Matt.
It's not part of the floodplain.
No, there is no mapped floodplain in here. It's what people have seen is when there was an open winter, and I've seen it several times myself when we don't have a winter like this where the snow is keeping it and the ice just builds up. If you get a rainstorm and then the ice builds up and that blocks the stream and then it keeps going, and it actually flowed underneath the piers of this. But as I said, the retaining wall and the frost wall will prevent that from happening in the future.
So the septic field, though, that's a state-approved septic field and all modern, going with a new tank, going with a new filter bed up in the top corner up there.
Yes, and it's also it's a clean solution, so it's actually a tertiary treatment, you know, or not tertiary, but a secondary treatment. It's an aeration tank rather than a septic tank, so the effluent being disposed of is cleaner than a standard system.
And the issue of moving the house to have less impact?
Well, as you can see, here is the existing setback right now, and we're just a foot or two away from it. And we had applied early on when Sheepshead Bay had it, we applied for a variance because when they started, Wolfeboro had just gone from a 10-foot side yard setback to an indexed setback based on the amount of frontage. So we had requested, we came to the zoning board and asked for a variance to be able to build within 10 feet of this side yard to get further away from the wetlands, and that variance was denied unanimously.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Sager, did you have...
Very quickly.
Okay.
Use your pointer.
This area, which is still outside of the setback and further back from the lake and not within the wetlands, how come that's not a site that was looked at for an alternative site?
The reason we didn't choose to go here was because this is a natural site today, and we felt that it also is within the buffer, so it would require the same type of permitting. You're going to be disturbing an area that's presently undisturbed, and we felt that it only made sense to stay in the area that's been historically disturbed, and that's why we didn't look up in that area.
And I believe the cottage that's existing right now is on piers, and you're proposing a foundation or a slab that would be less allowing water to pass underneath the cottage and sort of constitutes a wall if you build what you're planning to build. Is the proposed foundation going to be less or more resistant to water passing under the cottage than what's there right now?
Yes, right now it's just on piers, so this will be a 4-foot frost wall, plus it will stick out of the ground a couple of feet of concrete, so it's going to be impervious whereas now water can go underneath the structure because it's, or ice can go under it because it's nothing to stop it.
Is that any concern to you as far as being in the floodplain or more concentrating the water into the wetland?
Again, it's not in a floodplain. FEMA does not show any of this area as a floodplain, but it will keep the runoff into the area where it naturally wants to flow, and it will keep it from running beneath the piered structure now, which isn't that great for the environment either.
Excuse me, and you've got the trench drains around that to hold it in its place so that the water stays in that footprint area. Is that correct?
And doesn't go into the lake.
Two more quick questions. You have, with the application, Heritage Bureau letters that are from 2010. Are those still current?
Those are only valid for 1 year, but every time we've submitted, I submitted 2 of the Heritage letters as demonstration, as well as we had an on-site done by the wetland scientists that showed that there were no
endangered species.
exemplary or endangered types of flora or fauna.
And my last question is, when the construction bridge is gone, there will be no ability to reach the new cottage by vehicle. You'd have to traverse either over the walkway or walk through the wetland or drive through the wetland. Okay. No safety issues there, ambulance or anything along those lines?
That was raised at the TRC, and Deputy Fire Chief Tom Zotti did not see that as an issue. They felt that any fires, they wouldn't want to get any closer than what is there. Additionally, from Pine Harbor condominium in emergency situations, there's a driveway here, and the fire department has the right to go wherever they need to go, and emergency people, so they could get down here. Yeah. And they also felt that they could, get someone out across that walkway.
Is the bridge area higher than 30 inches?
Is the bridge higher than
the walkway area?
No, it does not appear to be.
I think that's the building code, if I'm not mistaken, above 30 inches.
You'd need rails if it was above 30 inches, yeah.
And Jim, I got a question on the septic here. Once this is all put in and the temporary access for the construction vehicles is removed, has there been thought as to how those tanks would be maintained to be pumped? And I guess another part of that question is, with this newer, these clean solution type tanks with the aeration in them and stuff, do they need to be treated or pumped more often than your normal septic tank? So
no, they change the medium in them, and they bring that in a pickup truck. I think so. It's that would be easy. As far as the pumping, they can the septic tank hauler can pump that. There's not a great deal of head. It's horizontal, and they can run with enough hose to get over there. I know the Johnsons have tried to work with Pine Harbor on and off about the ability to make use of this. They haven't had any success.
That's closer, but yeah.
But that that would be another way if they were ever to strike a deal.
Is there any other member of the public want to speak? You folks all set?
I have a question. 25 years from now, that building is going to need a new roof. How is that affected, given that you need to get all materials there and remove all the old materials?
I have had this conversation with the owners, and they have professed that they will basically, it will be very labor intensive.
Okay, other questions, Matt? Do you have anything else?
I don't have any additional questions.
Okay, any other questions, folks? Okay, what is your pleasure? Would you like to hear conditions that Matt is suggesting?
I think that would be a good idea.
Sure. I'm going to recommend 7 conditions as opposed to the 6 that are on.
Okay, now we did talk about planting, some plantings, and what was the other?
Plantings?
Yeah, didn't that suggestion come up?
That suggestion did come up. I'm not. Are you suggesting making that a requirement?
Well, yeah, I'm wondering if we should consider that. We generally do.
If the applicant says through his agent or her agent that they intend to leave the area as it exists today in its natural state, I wonder whether we need to entertain any questions regarding plantings.
Okay.
I do believe the basal area requirement in the ordinance also protects against significant removal of trees as well. So I think that there's.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that?
I think they're traveling on a pre-existing area.
Excuse me?
The traveling in a pre-existing area is what he testified to us.
Okay. All right.
So I have 7 conditions for your consideration, the first being the incorporation of the plan to the date of this approval. I would also like to add to this first condition that the very poorly drained soils information be added as Mr. Rhines has presented tonight, including the new calculations reflecting that. I think he presented the material, but I want to make sure it's on the final plan as opposed to the plan you have here. Condition 2, incorporation of all the documentation submitted in the application package. Condition 3, compliance with the pre-construction siltation and erosion control measures as shown on the plan, which in this case really focuses on the installation of silt fencing. Condition 4, an inspection of the town prior to construction to look at the siltation devices installed. Payment of all recording fees being condition number 5. Condition number 6 being compliance with the monumentation of the edge of the wetlands in compliance with 175.9.1, wetlands boundary monumentation, with those 4 sub-bullets there. Condition 7 is a merger of lots 158-023 and 158-021 to be completed by the applicant prior to any construction beginning.
Okay.
That's a condition of this approval.
Okay, so basically we've determined this is certainly a reasonable use of a pre-existing lot. The addition seems to be modest. We do have the Conservation Commission's comments, which we have considered. The applicant has spoken to those, and the impact into the wetland setbacks and buffer areas all seem to be reasonable because of all of the fragile land in this lot's very difficult to make any improvements. And the state approvals have been obtained. The shorefront permit will need to be issued, but not until the special exception is dealt with by ZBA. The boundary line dispute, from our view, does not seem to impact the plan that we are reviewing for this particular application. So I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept application case number 2019-03 as complete.
Seconded.
Okay, motion. I'm sorry.
We already do a completeness.
We did not do completeness yet.
Okay.
We did, and I opened the public hearing.
Yeah, I just want to check on that. I thought we had done completeness.
Yes, and then
Did we do completeness?
We did completeness.
yes.
Oh, I missed it. Then yes, we did. I beg pardon.
Yes, we did. Okay.
Move to approve. Beg pardon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh.
With conditions as stated 1 through 7. Thank you, Mr. Planner.
Okay, and also the all of the sections of the zoning ordinance were addressed by the applicant. All in favor of the motion that was made with the conditions and approving this application with conditions, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And so that's 6-0. Folks, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn this off now.
Actually going to go.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment, but everybody is leaving. So I guess no public wants to comment.
We can move on.
All right. Okay, the next item is the Land Use Committee appointments, and I thought we had appointed the future Land Use Committee.
We had.
But we can do that.
We had already done that. You're right about the minutes.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Peterson's name was not included.
Right,
So he's
because
new.
he was the last one to hop on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
So if somebody would like to make a motion to add Bill Peterson to the future Land Use Committee, that would be great. I think he'll be a good addition.
On that recommendation, I'd be happy to recommend him.
Okay. Anybody want to second that motion?
Second.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The land use book distribution.
Here it comes.
Here they come.
Jesus.
You don't want one? I don't. It was in my box down. Okay.
What a lovely color they chose this year. Do you?
Yeah, yes, I have one.
Can't we get this in electronic version?
Wake you right up.
Thank you, Mr. Sager. Come and visit us again. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the planning board letter to the editor for the zoning amendments. Terribly excited about doing that, but that's up to the planning board to make that decision.
I don't feel that it's absolutely necessary this year, unless there's interest in addressing the petitions.
Right.
But that's, the other amendments I think are relatively straightforward.
Yeah, and the warrant's going to show our recommendation and or not. So I don't think unless a letter would be necessary, and I don't think we want to address in public the issue of that was raised earlier for obvious reasons.
Right.
I would not think we would need to do that.
Okay, then I'll go back to concentrating on the future land use.
One job you don't have to do, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Everyone agrees with that?
Everybody agree with that? Okay. All right. EDC. Matt.
Yes. Alan Harding, the chair of the EDC, and Kathy met last week to discuss a joint meeting with the EDC. We've tried to do this in the past, and I think we've had the meetings, but we're hoping to have another joint meeting of the two groups sometime in the next couple months. The first question is, are you interested in doing that? What would you like to discuss? And then the second question being, if you are interested, would you be willing to have this conversation potentially at the work session in March with the EDC? They met this morning and discussed the idea, and we're supportive of the idea, particularly in the context of the master plan that is about to come out, and many of the recommendations being assigned to them. They are sort of looking forward to the opportunity to talk to you again and to talk about how to actually implement those recommendations. But I just wanted to see your comfort level with that. I would sort of propose a roundtable format for that. I think that's probably the best way to do it, but I just want to get your sense of,
Yeah,
sense of how you
and
feel.
really to kind of pick up on some of the things that have come out of the master plan. I mean, I'm more familiar with the economic development chapter, but there are other members of EDC that I think were probably on other committees, weren't they? Or
Yep,
not?
I think every committee potentially had an EDC. No, not every committee, but close to it. A lot of people serving
Cindy
multiple
Melanson was
roles.
on your
And
committee,
Yep.
and
So is there any way they could give us like a press briefing or something ahead of time that we have an understanding on what we're going there for? If they've got some things that they'd like to discuss, I'd like to think about it before I get there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess a question I would have to that, John, is bullet points, or because I don't necessarily think that all the members of the EDC are in agreement on everything. So I think we could probably identify some bullet points to talk about. Would that be okay? Or
Yeah, from the most pressing that they all think is important to down the list to wherever.
okay.
So, what about making it a meeting to discuss the recommendations that are toward the EDC from the master plan committees?
I think that's
implementation.
That would be the primary focus. They also just, I think, want a chance to talk about what a productive relationship looks like going forward. Just more generally, you know, how do they communicate with you on zoning changes? How do they actually submit their input to the planning board, if at all? So I think it would be good to focus on the master plan recommendations, but I think that, like the chamber, they have some questions about how to best interface with the planning board, because I think they have similar concerns that, honestly, the planning board sometimes doesn't get the best rap when it comes to some of these petition warrant articles, and they want to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. So I believe they want to help, and I think that a better understanding of how to be involved in the process would be good for them. So I think that it's also a general conversation about that.
and we'll have our work plan. I mean, we're going to talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah.
I would second John's recommendation. I'd like to have something from them, giving an indication of what they're interested in talking to us about. Chamber of Commerce was quite happy to go that distance and give us a draft understanding of what they took away from this short meeting. I'd like to have something in advance from EDC also. I can't help but remember some of the previous meetings that we've had with EDC, and I'd really like to have a good sense of where we're going to stand, common ground for discussion, rather than walking in and finding that I'm not prepared for some of the issues that they raise.
Okay.
The other question is, are they not a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen?
They are.
Should they be addressing the Board of Selectmen with ideas?
They certainly could do that, but I think they are recognizing that the relationship with the planning board is a critical one.
Yeah. And
that although, and if they're going to take a position on something, they need to talk to the Board of Selectmen about it, but they're just feeling a bit lost on how to really get involved with some of the zoning processes, and they're feeling like they're getting a better sense with the master plan, but they want to improve that relationship, I think. So I think they have an authority above them, and it's definitely not you, but they think that you're kind of the most natural synergy between two groups out there. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there were three members of the EDC on our economic development committee.
Yeah, and it was productive, yeah.
Half of it, so, okay.
Well, I think the one comment I'd like to make is, seems like there's an unknown when somebody comes with a written warrant, like Victor came to us, and what the public thinks we're supposed to do. I don't think that is being projected properly or enough that people can say that's not their job, or it's their job, they're bringing it to us.
I think it's a great point, and I think I told John, I think I talked to you and I talked to others, the day of that petition hearing, I was on the phone all day with people who believed that we were proposing that zoning change because they didn't understand how the process works. And, you know, I don't like kicking the can and saying, well, we don't deal with that at all. I think after this voting cycle is over, we should maybe just put out something, whether it's in the paper or whatever, that doesn't attack a specific petition, but talks about how petition warrant articles are handled by the planning board. might be helpful. And so we don't have to focus then on any specific petition for this year. We can just say, look, we receive these annually. This is how we handle them. If you have an idea you'd like to talk to us about, come to us now so that we can potentially work with you on a zoning change that you have in mind.
I think this meeting with EDC might be helpful in that respect too, because I suspect that might be one of the issues that they have to bring up, since the Chamber had as an issue to bring up as well.
John, would that address some of what you're saying? Okay.
I'd like to go back to the, do we write something, letter to the editor or whatever, because the Wayfinding Sign Committee ended up basically saying that we could not put forth any proposal that worked. And immediately there was a proposal, a warrant article petition that came in. And since that time, there has been an article or a letter to the editor in the Granite State supporting that, that petitioned article. And I think that we should reply to that because I believe that our position is important. And in reaction to that particular letter to the editor, I ended up doing something that I really didn't need to do, which was I went to my phone and I said, okay, Google, navigate to Bradley's Hardware, Wolfeboro. And it took me there. From my house in the it didn't take me on the right road out of the orchards, but other than that, it was just fine. So, basically, the idea of these wayfinding signs is that are proposed in that petition are obsolete, and we need to make that statement so that this petition doesn't pass.
Okay.
They're not designed for cars. They were designed for people, and the people in cars can't read them anyway.
Or shouldn't.
Well, I share your concern, Pete, but I think that I feel uneasy with that because it's almost as if we're taking a political position in public against a publicly presented petition warrant article, and our grounds are not technical grounds, but they're theoretical grounds. Types of signs that are being proposed aren't appropriate for their use. I think that's something that we should thrash out on the subcommittee, not in the paper. This is I hate for this committee to get involved in a political fight in the newspapers, in the letters to the editor column, over issues that we're supposed to be considered impartial about, somewhat judicial about, certainly thoughtful about.
And it is a right of people to be able to submit a petition.
Yeah.
That is their right.
But is it proper to state our case?
Well, we did. I'm sorry, John.
I don't think we've stated a case on a petition warrant article. I think that's come up in the past.
Okay.
By not recommending, we're stating our position, and that goes on the ballot. And that's a tremendous amount of clout that this committee has. I mean, think to yourself how many warrant articles the board has not supported have passed in the last several decades, and I'm not sure I can think of any.
But at the same time, before this meeting, we ended up having 3 people here who were talking about how there are many people in the community who just say the planning board says no.
Agreed.
And so we need to make sure that the reasons why we say no are out there, and given that there were probably, 24 people listening to the hearing that we had, that's not a large section of the population compared to the number of people who read the letters to the editor of the Granite State.
Well, once, take it out to the future, once we write a reply, that letter was wrong, and these are the reasons why we think it was wrong. And then the next letter, if there's time, is going to be planning board's wrong, or the planning board did this, and then we're going to write another reply, and when does it end? I mean, it just seems to me that it's not something that we want to get involved in.
I mean, when we had the hearing, submitted the report from the wayfinding sign committee. I mean, we certainly did talk about it. Matt and I did a TV thing where we talked about the 2 petition warrant articles, and you know, our meetings are televised, so even though there weren't a lot of people here, people do watch those, so I'm told. But you know, so you want to make a motion and as to what you'd like to do, then let's.
I think the discussion says that it's the moot point, so we should move on. Somebody else wants to make a motion, I'd be more than happy to support it.
I have no interest in making a motion. I just want to make a comment. So many of these warrant articles come in just fatally flawed from the structure of them. Yeah. So we can't approve them, and it's really not our issue. I mean, they're contradictory or they're confused, and I don't know how that gets sorted out.
Yeah, it's tricky because even this year I was concerned about bringing Victor into the planning board beforehand because that could be construed as too much involvement. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was open, I think, to you all.
I think we probably should not do that again.
Yep, I agree. I think it was a lesson learned.
I think we should encourage people to come and have a general discussion about an issue.
Right.
I mean, I really wish more people would do that.
Right.
Because if we'd had a general discussion without this petition in front of us, I think things might have been a little different.
And I have concern about editing the petitions because then
we shouldn't be doing that.
Never do that.
Right. I'm just making it clear that you know, in the case where we had in Victor's case, there was a fatal flaw to it. There was just an error in zoning and then some grammatical errors. I will be, because the record reflects it, that petition was submitted 10 minutes before it was due on the last day for petitions. It also did not have enough signatures. We had to contact the petitioner to get those signatures. So we had no opportunity to review the petition until it was already finalized within our system. So, you know, if we recognized a missing element of the petition, we'd probably tell them that they have to correct it. But yeah, we can't really take a more active role in editing them.
I'm not even sure you should be doing that.
Yeah. So
if someone submits a petition warrant article with a flaw in it, I don't think it's our proper responsibility to say, hey, it's a flaw. This is an act on the part of a citizen.
Right. Unfortunately, there's no remedy for the petitioner to then withdraw their petition, which is just sort of an odd feature of the law. But
well, they can try again next year. That's it.
Yeah.
If you folks want me to, I can write a letter just on the wayfinding signs. If people are comfortable with me doing that.
I think the wayfinding sign is the folks put it out there. There's going to be implementation issues with that, and that wasn't addressed in their proposal. So when the thing passes, or if it doesn't pass, then we'll have to meet that at that point, and that's where I am.
Well, I guess those are the questions that have come up in my mind: is how the heck would that be implemented if it?
But it's not. But we're not solving the problems of the petition before the petition is voted on.
Yeah.
It's not our job.
Okay, so.
Be an interesting question for our lawyer to tell us if the warrant article passes, which is flawed, how do we implement it, or does it not get implemented, or does it get rewritten and then revoted on, or whatever?
Depends if when you say flawed, you mean illegal.
It basically cannot be implemented because it is illegal on the ground.
Then yeah, I don't think we have any obligation to enforce it. I'm not sure what the illegality would be.
Well, the part about putting the signs on private property is a question whether or not that's going to be able to fly or not. That's to me, that's the one sticking point of the whole thing that kept me from backing that.
Yeah, and I question how much in the implementation of it what can we require from a private property owner as far as consent. We don't know any of the answers to those questions. Yeah, well, I hope we don't have to figure those out, but if we do, we will. And I'll probably brief you on what we come up with, because I think it's going to be something we have to deal with over the next year period. But I'm hopeful that doesn't happen.
Okay, so,
No.
No.
oh, okay, all right,
Brad says no.
okay.
Staunch no.
Okay, 2019 work plan.
I prepared a version of 2019 work program. Tried to include a few items on here that, some items that are new, some items that are sort of ongoing, including application review, and continued with the format of sort of indicating how intense an effort is required, what the priority is of the project, and then some of these items I've actually put on our kind of a meeting schedule for the next 6 months, so we can get a sense of when these might come up as board meeting agenda items. I'm not going to go through each of these right now because I don't, it's 9 o'clock, I don't want to drone on, but if you have any specific questions about this, I'm more than happy.
It's 10 minutes to 9.
10 minutes to 9. Do you want me to go through each item? I can.
I was saying that for Kathy's benefit because CCO are going to be out.
One thing I do want to talk about, though, is that I did split this into kind of bigger efforts and rezoning efforts. So the ones on the bottom are really focused on zoning things that would have to be prepared for the next session. And what I'm thinking about is, and I've spoken to a few members individually, is potentially a subcommittee of the planning board to work with me closely on zoning amendments over the next year. Quite a few communities use this approach. It sort of lessens the burden on the planning board as we get closer to zoning amendment season, and also just creates a group of people who have a really intimate understanding of why we're making certain zoning changes and helping me review the zoning changes. In addition, it would be a group that starts meeting maybe not necessarily right now, but in the coming months, as opposed to really burdening the end of our yearly schedule with all of those zoning amendments at one time. So
We're going to have quite a few once.
We are going to have quite a few, and I look at the parking standards as a really good example where that's going to require a decent amount of effort, and I don't want to have 2 times a month to be able to brief you on all of the things that I think are problems, because it's going to be a lot for everyone to think of. So I'm just putting the idea out there now of potentially having maybe a 2 to 3 member rezoning subcommittee of the board to work with me directly on some of these bigger zoning changes moving into 2019. And again, I think this is a strategy that other communities have used well, and ultimately I would hope that it would lessen the burden on the board members to be an active part of those discussions until later in the process. So just an idea to throw out there for your consideration.
Okay.
It's have more committees, but just to...
Yeah, can we just get a general sense, though? I mean, how do you all feel about the elimination of the impact fee ordinance? I mean, is that something you think we should look at, of eliminating that, or?
Well,
I think we should have some outreach to hear from the public whether or not it's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And why are we acting on this? That's the question that I ask myself.
Yeah, the reason.
Yeah, okay.
The reason that I'm acting on it is because we are hearing from builders, at least, and property owners who are ultimately buying those homes, that it's a huge cost burden for them. And that's only one, of course, that's only one voice that we're hearing.
It's a huge cost for the more modest-sized
absolutely
homes as well.
For $200,000 homes, $250,000, $300,000, it's a huge cost burden, and one that usually gets tacked onto the property owner when they're purchasing the house.
What's the number?
4,184 for a single-family home. And really, John, I question the methodology for actually having it. It was created in a high-growth scenario when we were sending a lot of school children to the schools. We felt that we had to create a fee, basically, for those children. And we're seeing stagnation now in school enrollment, and I just question whether or not there's the same capital demand on the schools that there was when the fee was set up in 2007. So I'm not necessarily saying we should get rid of it, but I think we need to look at whether or not the fee study still applies to the way that our demographics are shifting, and look at whether or not it's a potential impact to our affordable housing stock, particularly new stuff that's being built, because that's what would be impacted.
Can we get letters of feedback from these people so we have documentation, so we have something valid in front of us that says these are legitimate?
Yep.
And
yeah, what we could do is, honestly, that would be a great place for our office to get some feedback, because that's where we hear a lot of it. We could have sort of a feedback box down there and use that.
And communicate to the chamber and to the EDC as well that we're considering this, get their impact.
And what about a tally of how much have we collected,
so
and how is it used?
So I can provide that. We got that together. There was a discussion with this group, I think 3 or 4 months ago, or maybe 5 months ago.
That was when
we did pull all the impact fee data together, and the way the impact fees are being used is to buy down the large capital bond that was taken out for the expansion at the high school years ago. So that's how those fees are being used.
Really?
Yeah. So I think we need to look closely at that as well, and I have some concerns there. So I think we need to collect feedback. I think we know how that feedback will sit, but I don't know.
Does that reduce the tax rate in any way?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why it requires thought, because it is.
There are how many towns that go to our school district? Do we all have the same impact fee?
You do not.
Yeah.
So it is being used as a school tax buy down here in Wolfeboro, where other communities do not have the same buy down. They're paying the full fee. It's being whatever the bond payment is that Wolfeboro would normally be paying, the impact fees are being used as an offset to that bond payment right now.
When you look at your tax bill and say 50% of it goes to the school, that buyback buys that number down.
Yeah, and
in a small way, I'm sure.
Exactly, yeah. And I'll show you the numbers for what we've collected. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's also not noticeable.
I don't think without the numbers we can really consider this any further.
Yeah,
we can't make a judgment one way or the other.
I mean, you could say the same thing about merging lots. You're taking tax money off the thing, and now everybody else has to pay for it there too.
Yeah, I actually heard I talked to somebody recently who made that argument to me that the planning board should not be permitting people to merge lots for that exact reason, which was kind of an interesting conversation. But I understand it. Makes some sense.
Okay, and we've talked, and this group has talked about moving the landscaping and all the lighting regulations into the site plan and regs. But the additional item is putting all the parking.
Yeah, I'd like to move part of
that ordinance and put it into site plan. Are you all?
I find that's fine because it gives us a lot of flexibility. How's the public going to feel about us throwing all the stuff into site plan review, which all of a sudden takes away standards and allows flexibility at the will of the planning board?
I think I am naive, but I think they'll be supportive of it. And maybe I'm wrong, but
I have no opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike.
The problem with the adverse is if you don't plant that one tree, or you don't want to plant that one tree in a place that doesn't make sense, now you have to go to the ZBA. That's silly.
Yeah, and on parking too, I mean, we just have some redevelopment applications that the parking just doesn't strictly conform. It's pre-existing, whatever the case may be. It just, I mean, I don't want to run waiver wild at the planning board level. I don't think you do either, but where it's appropriate, I think it would be nice to have the ability to waive a parking space on a 50 parking space lot. You know, that kind of thing would be nice to be able to do. So
okay.
It does give the planning board more power, I guess, publicly, but I think that's a good thing. I think it allows
one item that I'd like for us to consider are taking a new look at the stormwater management regulations that we passed. I think it was in 12.
Yep.
And mainly because the cyanobacteria committee now, and it's all, most of the discussion is about runoff. Well, we had quite a bit of discussion about it tonight. And, you know, I think it's an important issue, and are the regulations that we have in place really working? And I've had some discussions with Matt and Dave Ford, and I think you folks have some issues with them, that they could be improved so that they're doing what we really want them to do. And this issue, we're going to start hearing more and more about it. The other thing that I talked to Matt about is coverage. Our coverage in all of our residential zones is, in my mind, quite high. And the shorefront lots, we say you can have 30%, right? But if it's above 20%, you have to have a stormwater plan.
Or by PE, yep.
Yeah. And so, you know, I'm wondering if, when it has to do with water quality, properties within a watershed, should we be thinking about that?
I'd like to interject in that a little bit. I think a lot of this cyanobacteria is coming from septic systems and not as much from the runoff as being portrayed here. I think you got to get down to it where you're seeing septic systems of age, overcapacity, close to the lake, on a steep area, and not being fully taken care of the way they probably should be in some cases, and pumped like they should be. And me, that's where the cyanobacteria comes, because I've been down there, I've seen it, and a lot of cases where you go to a place and you get a flood like we had this fall, and you have an old property down next to the lake, and that whole septic system is now flooded, and all that septic water is now running on top of the ground, and I've saw it this fall running right into Lake Wentworth. Okay, so to me, that's where it's coming from.
Well, it certainly is coming from septic systems also.
Oh, yeah, just look at the Mirror Lake experience.
Right.
When they did the UNH study on Mirror Lake, they found it was coming from septic systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're looking at that hopefully with the Cary Beach work, because that area down there is high concern for us. I don't want to get into it too much, but the stormwater management regs we have are good for large commercial development, but they do not really apply well to smaller projects. They are incredibly intense for smaller projects. I think they need significant work, and I can give a more detailed presentation on what I mean by that, but we're also hearing on the larger projects that our requirements just cannot be met on sites from engineers, that they're not realistic. So we have some very strong requirements for total suspended solids and other things that are just infeasible to meet. And those recommendations, I think, were made available to the planning office, and I think that the planning office proceeded with what it felt was the best model, but I think we need to circle back and talk to some folks who are using these regulations and see whether there are some minor modifications that could be made that would make it a lot easier and would actually incentivize people using them more than resisting to use them because they're too onerous.
Right.
So that's what I'd like to do. And again, create sort of a medium tier where we still require stormwater management, but not to the level that we do on these huge commercial sites, I think would be really helpful. Big project.
Okay,
I think that would play well with people that we discussed earlier this evening and people that we'll be meeting later on.
Exactly. Yeah, tonight's a great project where that would not have risen to a level where stormwater management regs would have kicked in, but it might be nice to have something.
We put a lot of pressure on people who want to come and do redevelopment, and it seems like their costs go out of the roof, and the other properties that are just sitting there 40 years old are contributing to some of the causes, and the new people that come in that want to do the right thing, their costs for their permits and new septic plans and all that stuff are they go up there. So to me, we got to do something to get those old ones in conformity.
Point. Yeah, it definitely does feel like the small redevelopment projects are the ones that we really stretch pretty thin from a cost perspective. They're required to do a lot when their neighbors who are simply rebuilding in place may be required to do nothing, and it doesn't feel right all the time. So I don't know what we do about it, but it's something we need to look at.
It's hard to fight grandfather. It's hard to fight grandfather.
Yes,
I had this
that
house,
is true.
I had it, you know, and it's worked just fine, so.
That is true, but if you could give an incentive somehow, and I don't know, I need to think about that, but if you could give some incentive that you give them the ability to expand at the cost of doing something else, I don't know what it is, but I think you could think about some idea that would allow them to keep their grandfathering, but also do some stormwater management work. That would be awesome. But we have to.
Okay, anything else that we should add on to this list? Or do you think this will keep us busy?
When are we going to start reviewing the master plan chapters?
So the master plan chapters, I'd like to start reviewing those probably at a work session. And what I'm gonna do, I think, is send them out for you to look at on your own time, if that's okay, rather than having a detailed review session during a meeting. Is that approach okay? I can even print copies for everybody and send them home in a meeting. Okay. Then
You didn't comment on my wonderful suggestion to put them all in one place.
I did comment, did I not? I said, I think my comment was, I promised the future land use committee that I would do that. So we're gonna put them all online somewhere.
In one place on that
we're gonna put them all online in one
website.
place so people can look at them. So when I do that, I can just print copies for everybody. I can make them available for the next board meeting and just give you draft copies. Work?
Okay, all right.
Could we opt for just email instead of printed copies and save the trees?
Well,
sure.
Well, they're all on, see,
If you'd like a printed copy,
refer us to the, that page where you're gonna put them all nicely together.
If you'd like a printed copy, you can get one. Or anybody wants one. We know Kathy likes killing trees, so.
No, I'm not asking for copies. I'm asking for them to be all in one place on our webpage.
You don't want a paper copy?
No.
Okay, write that down.
May, but.
So I'll give those to you at the March 5th meeting.
Okay, the January 22nd minutes. Any comments?
I move to approve.
I'll second that at time
All right.
appropriate.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
So, don't have
I did have a comment here.
We haven't adjourned yet?
you got 9 channels, you know.
Yeah.
To adjourn.
Yep, thank you.
Projects on there and bed down in North Carolina, so because it goes to the whole paper and they make diaper fill for it.
Jesus.